Very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. We will start with the quote of the day. If purpose is bigger than pain, then purpose wins. So, this is a very relevant quote for all of us because at so many times, even during the preparation journey, we feel that the journey is very painful. We have to put in a lot of efforts, and that too, we do not know if these efforts are going to bear any fruit or not. So, we are taking a lot of pains in this. But then our purpose is clear in our mind that we have to clear this exam, we have to become an officer, and we have to contribute in nation building. So, if there is clarity of purpose, then that is going to definitely win over pain. So, when you feel distracted or when you feel low, when the motivation levels are low, so if you remember the purpose why you started, that is going to be bigger than the pain. So, definitely we will be back on track. And many times situations are not in our favor. So even in your ethics paper, you can use this quote to highlight that you will inspire and you will persuade your team, your colleagues, people in the village that the purpose is very important and the pain is going to be very temporary. So as a leader, you can guide them by telling this quote. So even for our freedom fighters, the purpose of freedom was bigger than the pain of the British atrocities, and finally the purpose won. So this quote you can make use of in your ethics paper and even essays. We will start with the first topic of the day, which is investments or digital economy. So, in this, the United States tech giant Google has announced that it is going to invest $10 billion in India in the next 5 to 7 years. So, this the Google is going to do under the Google for India Digitization Fund. So, it is going to invest this huge amount of $10 billion in the coming 5 to 7 years. And then the next question comes is how is it going to invest in India? So this investment can either be through a partnership that Google can enter with any of the firms in India, or it can be through equity investments. It can be by developing the digital infrastructure in India, or it can make some investment in the entire digital ecosystem in India. So, through these four ways, Google is planning to invest that amount of $10 billion. The main objective of this step by Google is to increase the quality and also to reduce the cost of the digital services in India or access to the internet per se in India. So it wants to bring about smartphones which are high in quality but low in cost, particularly for emerging markets like India, and increase the penetration of internet and access to internet in the country. So this is the step. Next, we will look into the various areas where Google plans to invest. So, this investment could be in education, it could be in health, in agriculture, and also in empowering the MSMEs. So, these are very important areas where there is a lot of scope for the digital services to be provided, which is going to increase the access of these services like health and education to a large number of population, both demographically as well as geographically. So now let's look at the benefits that this whole investment could bring to India. The first is the engagement. It is going to improve and further deepen India's engagement with the United States firms, tech firms, and also bring about their technology at a low cost to India. The second is the digital economy. India already we have the Digital India initiative, and a lot of emphasis has already been laid on the digital services, e governance, and delivery of services through the internet. And the third benefit is with respect to disentangling with China. So, for India now, various equipments which are required for mobile or internet access, they come from China. And China in India also has huge investments in this digital technology space. So, because of this, there is a lot of dependence in India on the Chinese equipments and the Chinese investments, even in the digital space. So, this investment by the United States tech firm is also going to help us to reduce our dependence on China, and as far as the equipments for providing the internet access is concerned. So, this is going to help us in reducing our dependence on China as well. So, these are the important data that was with respect to this article, that is the digital technology and the investments by companies. So this you can use when you're talking about the Digital India initiative and how what we are doing to promote the digital economy. And two, you can also talk about this when you talk about the India United States relations. And third, also regarding the investments in India. So you may have a question like the private investments or the investments in India, they are falling, so comment or something like that. So you can say that these tech giants are also investing in India, particularly at the time like this where there is a crisis of the pandemic, but still there is so much of investment coming into the digital space. So this makes the digital space all the more important when we talk about resilient or Atmanirbhar Bharat. We go to the next topic now, which is related to the police reforms. So this whole article revolved around the fact that there have been a lot of police casualties in India right since the independence, and then it goes on to examine what are the reasons behind these increased police casualties while they are handling law and order situations. The article starts with a data which says that between 1947 and 2019, nearly 35,000 police personnel have lost their life while they were on the line of duty. So, also recently there was this interview that was taken by IIM Rohtak. So, in this interview, IIM Rohtak wanted to examine what are the reasons behind the high casualty rate, and the whole article further examines. So, we'll just understand quickly the reasons for the high casualty in the police. First is inadequate training. So, training is actually one of the most important part of a career in the police. So it shows that the data says that only 6.4% of the police constables have actually received any training in the last 5 years. So this shows a very low percentage of training, and also training is very important if they have to carry out their duties in the field, facing all the challenges which are also newly emerging in the field. So this inadequate training is one factor responsible for the high casualty. Second is the police fatigue. So this has been a news for several times that the police are always overworked. They work for nearly 13 to 14 hours a day, and this they do for day after day without any rest. So this leads to a lot of frustration and fatigue among the police. This has also led to depression and a lack of social life for them, which they have shown while they are performing their duties. So this fatigue will come in way of they performing duty efficiently, and this is again another reason that has led to higher police casualties. Next is the stress. So the stress while the police are working has also mounted in the recent times. This stress could be the one that is related to the job and the one that is related to the situation also. So there is actually this kind of an inverse U relationship when we talk of performance and stress. When the stress initially increases, a person tends to perform better under stress. But after a particular point, when the stress further increases, the performance drops very sharply. And also, it tends to have a negative impact on the mental health of the person. So because of this, the person is not in a good perfect mind shape of mind while he is carrying out his duties, and is more likely to succumb to the challenges that they face in the field. So this is another reason for casualties. Next is underestimating the threat. So the police have this tendency that for any operation that they carry out, the preparation required is often underestimated, and therefore the preparation is inadequate. So there are several emerging sophisticated challenges which could be cyber crimes or superior intelligence gathering that the criminals have started to do in these recent years. So this threat perception is actually very low among the police, and they underestimate the threat. Therefore, the preparation that is required to tackle this challenge. So in that process, they go underprepared to tackle the challenge, and they also then lead to further casualties. Next is a breach of confidence. So this was exemplified by the recent Vikas Dubey episode, where the 8 policemen were killed by the aides of Vikas Dubey. And it was a news that somebody from within the police department had leaked out the information about the police raid that was going to happen on his home. So this breach of confidentiality from within the police force is another important. Next is a fear of collateral damage. So whenever the police have to open fire on somebody in the neighborhood in order to protect themselves or in order to handle the law and order situation, they feel that this could lead to collateral damage. So when they are opening fire, they feel that it could lead to some damage to the property, or it could also hit a civilian, an innocent civilian, and it could cause a loss of his life. So therefore, the police are very cautious when they are using the or opening arms, because they fear that it could lead to more collateral damage. So in this fear, when they don't use arms, when they don't open fire, they are usually shot at and they succumb to their injury. So these are the various reasons why there have been increasing casualties among the police personnel in India. The next article is related to Skill India. And by the way, the first article that we spoke about regarding the Google investment, I have already told you the application. And for the second article on police reforms, so it definitely comes under the GS paper 2, and regarding the law and order and how it is managed, and also under GS paper 3 when we talk of internal security, there also you can use the inputs. The third article is related to Skilling India under the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. So this article was written by our Vice President Venkaiah Naidu, where he examines how this should be used as an opportunity, that what exactly Atmanirbhar Bharat is and what needs to be done to aim for and actually become self-reliant. So first it starts by telling what are the important objectives of Atmanirbhar Bharat. The first is that manufacturing has to be scaled up. So domestic manufacturing has to be given that push and impetus, and that needs to be scaled up. Second is that we need to accelerate the development of infrastructure in the country. So many of the investments are held back because of the infrastructure bottlenecks in the country. So therefore, the aim of Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative is also to accelerate the infrastructure development in the country. Third is to attract investments. So investments are the drivers of the economy, important one of the key important determinants of the economic growth. So therefore, attracting investments is very important for economic growth. So this is the third objective of the self-reliant India. And the fourth is consumption-led growth. Why? Because there is a lot of uncertainty and volatility when it comes to the global environment, and also the countries across the world are also looking to be more inward-looking tendencies increasing. So therefore, we should not depend much on the export-led growth, but rather we should also be promoting consumption-led growth. So this is the fourth pillar of the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. So these are the four important objectives or the pillars of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Of Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative. When we talk of the aim of Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, and also a long-term aim. It can be a short-term aim. So this way, while presenting your answer also, so this way while presenting your answer also, you can properly categorize and write it in a very systematic manner. The first thing is that we have to revive our economy, which has faced the shock of the pandemic, which has faced the shock of the pandemic. The second has now crumbling. The second is around the globe also there is economic downturn. Around the globe also there is economic downturn. There is a recession kind of a situation that has happened because of the volatility will touch India also, and waves of volatility will touch India also and is going to affect India's economy also. So the aim of Atmanirbhar Bharat is to insulate Indian economy from the volatility in the Indian global economy from the volatility and the downturn global economy that's happening in the global economy. Downturn that's happening in the global economy. Aim of this is the second short-term aim of in the long run, the first aim is to build capacity in the country. Aim is to build capacity. So we need to increase the capacity of our manufacturing sector. So we need to increase the capacity of our manufacturing sector. Various sectors we need to identify and build capacities. We need to identify and build capacities in these sectors. Particularly to promote the local products. The second is so we have always been importing a lot, especially from China. Always been importing a lot, especially from China. Encourage the production of local products. Encourage the production of domestic manufacturing improves, so that our domestic manufacturing improves and the job generation also make our economy more robust in the long run by scaling up our own manufacturing. By scaling up our own manufacturing. In this regard, what Atmanirbhar Bharat is not. So many times when the term is said, there are many opinions which come telling that this initiative is mainly aimed at import substitution. So we are going back to the even before the 1991 era. But that is not true. So what Atmanirbhar Bharat is not, is it is not about protectionism. So it is not trying to uh, erect more barriers for the global trade. So that is not what it is, and these two are not what Atmanirbhar Bharat aims to achieve. So its main aim is to encourage domestic manufacturing, to attract investments, to improve infrastructure, and also improve the consumption-led domestic economy. So these are the aims of Atma Bharat. So, in this regard, what should be the way forward? So, India is a country that is having a demographic boom at present. So, 65 percentage of our population is below the age of 30 years, and 50 percentage of our population is below the age of 25 years. So, this demographic dividend needs to be harnessed, and we need to capitalize on this potential. So, for that, we need to go for the upgradation of skill among the youth. So, when we talk of the skill upgradation of youth, these skills can be the technical skills and also the social skills. As far as technical skills are concerned, we have several emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, we have machine learning, data analytics, cloud computing, Internet of Things, robotics. So, these are the various emerging technologies in which we have to invest in the skilling of our youth right from today if we need to be part of that global workforce tomorrow. Second is we also need to invest in the social skills. Why? Because now in the post pandemic world is going to be very different from the pre pandemic world. So, social skills become very important where you might be sitting back at your home and you might have to do a lot of work from home. In which case, you will need to develop better skills of listening, communication, and you also need to have sensitivity to the other cultures. So, that cross cultural sensitivity is needed, and the work environments also keep very rapidly changing. So we need to be more flexible, and you must have the capability to adapt to the changing working environments. For that, you need to have emotional intelligence, and you also need to develop the social etiquettes along with the technical skills. So therefore, when we talk of the demographic boom or the bulge that we are enjoying now, today onwards we need to invest in the technical skill upgradation and in the social skill upgradation of our youth. So only then we'll be able to benefit from this demographic boom in the future. So, in this also comes the role of the private sector. So, the government itself cannot do everything on its own. The private sector needs to fill the space and also invest in the research and development in the new technologies. So, this is very important. And further, innovation is very important. So, we need to also emphasize on creating a conducive environment for innovation where it is more encouraged. So, if you look at the current pandemic situation, when we did not manufacture any personal protective equipments before the COVID, but now we are manufacturing several lakh PPE kits in India. Similarly, many automobile companies have come forward to produce ventilators. So this shows a level of innovation that is present in the country. Similarly, IIT Roorkee has come out with Pranav Vayu, which is a low-cost ventilator. So this shows the potential that innovation can have in India, and the kind of efforts that if we put in innovation, then what kind of products it can deliver to us. So this also shows the capability of our scientists, of our technocrats, and of these innovators. So therefore, we need to improve the thrust that we have put on innovation, and we need to further improve that. So as a conclusion, the two things that we need to emphasize upon is our human resource and the technical capabilities. So we need to modernize our human resource based on both the skills, technical and social, and we also need to increase the technical capabilities. So we must emphasize on the skill, scale, and the speed. So if we focus on this, then we can have an Atmanirbhar Bharat where India can match up with the world in this 21st century. So this was about the Atmanirbhar. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to be on track while you're preparing for UPSC exam. There are two specific reasons for this. One is that today somehow the newspapers, there weren't many articles to be discussed, and two, because many of you have been constantly messaging and have been getting so many messages on how the aspirants are feeling low in this time of the pandemic, and there's so much of uncertainty. So how to keep someone or how to keep oneself always on track. So this has become a challenge for you all. So I thought I'll use this opportunity that today there's less content in the newspaper to share with you how I always set my targets and how I managed my time when I was preparing. So let's first start with setting the targets. So I used to read as a public administration student a quote by Peter Drucker that what gets measured gets managed. So it's always important to quantify your targets and clearly so that you know what is to be done when in what amount of time. So no matter what, that has to be achieved. So this must be first of all crystal clear in your mind. So when you're going about setting the targets, you must have first of all a bird's eye view of what you have to achieve in the say in 1 year time of your preparation, and then you have to break it down into every monthly targets and then weekly targets and also then everyday targets. So this having a bird's eye view and then coming down to the specifics is very important. So let's say if you have 3 months with you or 4 months with you and you have said each month I have to prepare one GS paper. So for example, this month I have to complete my GS1 paper. So if this is the target, go and take the syllabus of the UPSC exam and then see how many topics are there in GS1. When you count the number of topics and when you count the number of days you will have a clear understanding as to how many topics you have to cover per day. So then you come down to making the daily targets after you have this monthly target of completing GS1 syllabus completely. So that many number of topics will have to be completed that day, that particular day, no matter what. So this target now has been set. And also when you are planning for a week, so now we come to the weekly targets. When you the way I used to do is, if there are 7 days in a week, I always studied on just 5 days in a week. The 6th day was completely kept for revision and the 7th day was kept for writing a test in the first half, and in the second half I used to relax and so that I can rejuvenate myself for another laborious week. So this was a way you have to plan your week so that on the normal days of the week you are also studying intensively your topics, your targets that you have to achieve. You're also revising them constantly and then you're also testing yourself. So this read, revise, test. So this 3 read, revise and test will have to be done every week repeatedly for over months together. So this was a strategy that I adopted and this was done very consistently. So this is about setting the targets. Now let me start with routine and time management. So many of us, it is very common that we face a lot of time management issues because we have to cover our optional, the 4 GS paper, essay and prelims, mock tests, evaluation. So many things are there that we need to do in a particular day. So in that case, how do you make that into your routine and how do you manage your time? So for that, every day you need to have a consistent routine and there should not be much deviation over it unless and until there is some emergency. So in the daily routine, I used to get up early in the morning and first thing that I used to do is read the newspaper. So newspaper reading, I cannot stress it enough that it is the single most important thing. Because like many other aspirants, I had also read many summaries of newspapers and all that. But eventually when I went to the exam hall, when I saw the mains questions, I somehow the pages of the newspaper notes that I had made was coming in my brain repeatedly. What I mean to say is that notes helped me a lot in framing the answers and the mains, because the questions that are being asked is very dynamic. So it is not like this is the issue and these are the points that you have to write. So it doesn't happen that way. In mains, the kind of questions that are being asked, they are very dynamic and you have to collate points from several days of newspaper reading, and only then you'll be able to frame your answer very coherently. So the first thing to be done is to read the newspaper. After that, I used to have my breakfast, and after breakfast I used to start studying my optional. So the first half of the day I used to do my optional till 1 o'clock. So after having 1 o'clock, I used to take bath. The reason, actually it is not very healthy, I wouldn't advise anybody to do that. But the reason I did was that because I used to feel very sleepy after having my lunch and I didn't want to sleep at that point of time. So after that, I used to meet a friend and both of us would discuss general studies. So when I say general studies, the one single most important thing that we did was to read and revise is secure. So this formed a part of the routine till evening. So by evening, we used to read and revise Secure. And in the evening, I took a small break of say half an hour. And after that, I again used to read Secure or other GS portions, whatever the static portions, whatever I have to read. So the first half of the day was already given to optional. So in the second half, completely I used to give for general studies, because general studies has 4 papers, so it requires more attention, and optional has 2 papers. So accordingly, the first half has already gone for optional, but so in the second half I used to give completely for GS. After half an hour break in the evening, I would again start and read some fresh topics of the static or some other Secure, so that next day afternoon we can revise that portions of Secure. So this was my routine. And also at night, after my dinner, I used to plan for something that is very light and is also interesting. So for instance, I used to look for some stories or some quotes which I can use in ethics and essay answer. I used to brainstorm ethics answer every single day without fail. So this helped a lot while writing answers. Then my optional was public administration. So I used to give some time to memorize the articles of the Constitution which I have to reproduce in the answers. So these were small little things which I used to keep after dinner, so that it doesn't become very heavy. At the same time, I am using my time productively without wasting the time post dinner, because mostly after dinner all of us get the day time becomes like our productivity will fall sharply and we hardly do anything. So in order to prevent that, I used to keep these light things. And one more thing that I used to do when I was with my friend reading Secure is that every day we used to brainstorm some questions. So we used to collect questions from various test series, and then every day we used to brainstorm some 4 to 5 questions, add value to it, search and add some examples and case studies, and we used to prepare those brainstormed questions, say 4 or 5 questions per day. So this we did on a regular basis. The next thing that I would like to emphasize is the importance of revision. As I have already stressed in the first slide of this, that first is the read and then revision and then is test. So revision is very important. We always tend to feel that whenever, even I for that matter, I used to feel when I'm revising that I'm actually wasting time. I could have covered so many new fresh topics rather than revising. So this was the initial feeling that I used to get. But this is very wrong. Revision has to be done multiple times, only then you will be able to use that piece of information in the answer. So even in the last 3 months of ICANN, you must have studied so many things. But given one question or given one essay, let's say, tomorrow if I give you an essay, and very few of you might be able to use those stories and those quotes and personalities that we have seen over a period of 3 months. Very few of you will be able to incorporate that into your essay successfully, because overall you might feel that yes, every day you have taken notes, every day you've been religiously following, but if you don't revise, you don't remember many of these stories which you could have used successfully to open and introduce your essay to make it more attractive. So revision is the key, and it has to be done multiple times. It should not be ignored at any cost. So every week this schedule has to be followed: read, revise and test. So this is one thing. And then I come to the way I did my revision. So when I made my notes, as I said, when I was doing every day afternoon, I used to do Secure and discuss with my friend. That was just a discussion and then taking notes of the important points from Secure articles and the synopsis. So the next thing that I used to do in while I was revising in the weekend on Saturdays was that I used to just read out whatever was there in my notes, and I used to record it. So this audio I used to keep listen to it many times. And also when I am listening to this audio, there is a tendency that if you're listening to something, you are listening but then you're also dozing off, or you're getting distracted. You will start thinking about something else. In order to prevent that, when I was listening to my own audio, I used to keep a piece of paper on which I would just scribble the important keywords of every topic. So these sheets of paper where I have scribbled the important keywords will become a very good source of revision on the previous day of the exam, where you have all the keywords that you have scribbled while listening to the audio. So this way you will not miss out any important keywords that are must to be written on a particular topic in your answers. So this was one way that I did. And also one more thing that I would like to stress here is I have done newspaper reading and Secure even on the previous day of the prelims. So secure takes nearly 3 to 4 hours, but still I have done it on even the previous day of the prelims. Somehow I always felt very secure after doing secure, so I never felt like leaving it. And this has immensely helped me in clearing prelims also. Again, the questions that come in the prelims are so different. We might attempt so many tests and test series, but then the questions that get asked by UPSC are very different. So we feel that they asked something out of the blue or something. But then when you read something as a normal person, like when you read something just like that without taking the load to remember it and to reproduce it, or that it will come in prelims, actually those information will help you to eliminate a lot of answers in prelims. Your common sense levels goes up if you keep reading newspapers and if you keep reading secure. So this is what happened to me. A lot of information that I randomly used to read in secure and the newspapers helped me a lot in answering the prelims questions. So this is one more thing. And then the important purpose of the revision should be, whenever you are revising, you are just not trying to put in your memory whatever notes you have made, but you're also trying to improvise on that. So the purpose of revision, like when I was revising, I revise my content, and then I used to think that what else can I do to make this notes more organic and more I can add more value. So with the given content, I used to see if I can present it in a better manner, if I can add any diagrams to it, if I can add any flow charts or graphs to it. So what is a better way to present this? So this has to be the main motive while you're revising a topic. So you're also revising the content, but at the same time you're also thinking how it can be better presented. So initially, when you are taking notes when you are reading something for the first time, you can't really think about presentation much, because that time you're just developing your content. But during your first revision, that is the best time where you can think about the presentation of that particular content. So what question can be asked on this content, how you are going to present it on the paper, what value addition you're going to do, what diagrams you're going to make, all of that you have to think while you're doing your first revision and keep them ready, so that from second revision onwards you can have a glance at the value addition that you have made, so that it stays in your memory and the same will get replicated in the exam. So the next thing is regarding fighting uncertainty. So everybody goes through this phase. Everybody has this self-doubt that will I be able to clear this exam? Do I have it in me? Do I have that potential to make it there? So all of us will start fighting with these kind of uncertainties, and that is very common. But what used to inspire me and push me is the words of some of the people who I have always admired and who have always inspired me. For instance, my mother. So my mother has been a big source of inspiration for me, and her words, she believed in me more than I believed in myself. So she always used to say that definitely you're going to make it. So you're going to be there one day. So her words used to motivate me a lot. Similarly, my friends. My friends have been tremendous support always. And even Vinay sir. So when I gave my first interview and I didn't find my name in the list, I went to sir. I was like, I had worked so hard, but still I couldn't make it. So Vinay sir told me that your success has only been delayed, it has not been denied. So those words used to ring in my ears every time, that yes, my success is only delayed, it's not denied. I'm soon going to be there. So that is one thing, is whoever believes in your ability, whoever thinks that you have it in you to make it there, so they are a source of inspiration for me, and they will be for you as well. The second important thing that I always did was, honestly speaking, I always used to keep my targets very high. So my targets were always very high. I have heard many people saying that secure is very bulky, so it cannot be done. So they go in search of some other alternatives, materials which are more concise and crisp. But in spite of that, I have always stuck with secure, no matter how bulky it was. And not just secure, I had targets of completing, going through the mind maps, the daily current events, and also insights editorial. So when I'm telling you all this, that I had all these targets, definitely it looks and it was very heavy, it was very bulky, and I was biting more than I can chew. But still I kept my targets high, because only when you keep your targets high, you have that sense of urgency throughout the day, to be always on your toes, to be always working, because you have this huge target which you want to complete, which you aspire to complete. Don't worry if you're unable to do so much, if you have completed 80-90% of your target. But the fact is that when you are given time bound targets and the targets are huge, human beings have a tendency to challenge themselves and somehow do whatever it takes with that sense of urgency to somehow reach the target. So this is what happened to me when I kept my targets high. I always used to focus that somehow it's a challenge to me that I have to meet this target. So I'm a person who it gives you a sense of accomplishment at the end of the day when you complete your targets, that I had challenged myself with such a huge target and I was able to accomplish it. So it gives you a sense of power and motivation when you do that. So, by sense of urgency, what I mean is you really have to be always on your toes. So, for instance, I was sharing my routine with you. I told you about discussion with my friend. So, when my friend used to come to my home for discussion, I literally used to give my friend 2 minutes to settle down and turn on the laptop, and not more than that. Many times, my friend used to get really frustrated and mad at me that I'm not even giving some breathing space. So, this was a sense of urgency with which you will have to take up things if you really want to achieve those targets. And one more benefit of keeping such high targets of doing all those things that I listed was that it helped me to revise multiple times. For instance, I am doing secure, and then in the evening I am going through the insights into editorials and then current events. Among these, there is a lot of redundancy and there is a lot of repetition. Now, some people say that no, there is a lot of redundancy, so that's why they don't want to read this and that. But then it's actually a blessing in disguise that it is so much repetitive and there is so much redundancy. Because what most people aim is that okay, if mains is after 4 months, then after 3 months, 1 month exclusively I will keep for revision. But for me, because I read from so many sources on insights and there was so much of repetition and redundancy that even in a single day, I might end up reading the same topic twice or thrice. In every week, we have seen even in ICANN, the topics are so repetitive that comes in the newspapers. And on the same topics, questions are being framed every day. And I'm reading the same thing every day, which means that every day you are revising some or the other portion of the syllabus that you have already read. So by the end, you must have I would have read the same topic nearly 10 to 15 times by the end of the month. So this helps you register those things in your long-term memory, and you will never forget that. So this is one more added advantage if you are keeping your targets high and if you are working with a sense of urgency. So the reason I told you this is that when the targets are so high, there is hardly any breathing space or any time that is left to think that what will happen if I'm not getting selected? Am I really working in the right direction? Am I doing enough to get selected? So all these kinds of self doubts and uncertainties you don't face because you don't have time even to think about all that. So this is one. Apart from aiming high to fight your uncertainties, another thing is definitely I used to listen to a lot of songs like everybody does. So every day after breakfast and after lunch, I used to feel a little sleepy. So that was when I used to listen to my song, some of the songs. My favorite song was the Dangal title track. So it talks about believing in the dreams and that if you put in a lot of efforts, it is going to bear fruits for you. Then I even used to imagine those people who did not have that faith in me that I will get selected one day. And in Dangal, there is a line which talks about the difference between the lion's roar and a sheep. So that line says that बेड़ की हाहाकार के बदले शेर की एक दहाड़ है प्यारे दंगल दंगल. So I used to tell this to myself and I used to visualize myself as a lioness and that I'm conquering this thing called UPSC and I'm going to top it. So these kind of visualizations, these songs are also definitely a very good boost to your motivation and they can help you keep yourself high. And I used to keep reminding and singing these lines even before the paper in the exam. So that used to give me a burst of energy also. And apart from songs, another thing that I have strongly believed in is Nishkam Karm. So I always believed in the fact that I have the duty only to do my work and leave the rest. So the things are going to fall in place and I will get my due result if I'm doing my work well. So I always believed in this concept of Nishkam Karm. And to give you an example, supposing if today the mains exam is ending, so you will see me studying after 2 3 days. So I never used to expect that I have done tremendously well in mains, so I have to wait for the result. I have to start calculating and speculating how much and what will happen. And another example was that once I had given in 2007, I had given interview, and then the results were out just 15 days before the next prelims. So in 17 for the 17 exam, the results came on I think May 31st, and the next the prelims was on June 18th. So I had hardly 2 weeks time before prelims. So that time often there is a tendency that okay, if you have failed in the interview and you have so much less time for prelims, many people take the decision of either skipping the prelims, or they feel so bad about the results that they are unable to read for the prelims very sincerely. So but tonight result came and I didn't clear even after giving interview for the second time in a row. And from next day onwards I had started studying or preparing for prelims. So I never used to in the sense of the term mourn or feel so sad about my failures also, for that matter. So you need to believe in this strategy, this concept, and you need to detach yourself from the results. You have just the right to work in the direction of the aim that you have to achieve. And even when somebody used to compliment me, that I always remained grounded. For instance, when I sir used to tell me that my optional was PABAD and PABAD was scoring low marks during those years, he used to tell me that you take care of your optional, you are going to be in top 10, mains is a cakewalk for you and all that. But I never took it to my heart that oh my god, I'm so good at general studies, so I'm going to excel in this exam. So all of these thoughts never came to my mind. So always keep yourself grounded, and no, if somebody is telling wrong about you, or if somebody is praising you, complimenting you, take everything with an equal amount of emotion. So that emotional intelligence is again very important. Thing I would talk about is a positive attitude. So always positive attitude works the best. So even if you are doing donkey labor, you are doing a lot of hard work, but it will not pay if your attitude is not positive towards the exam. If you don't feel that you are not going to, if you are going to make it, then you will never make it. So that positive attitude is very important. And also one another thing that I would like to tell now that I'm already in service. So on this side of the line, the way it feels is that as a human being, we will always have the tendency to achieve something higher and higher. In public administration, we call it the concept of self actualization. So many of you might be knowing about it. So even after getting selected, getting a good rank, the next thing you will ask yourself is now what? What is the next thing that I have to do? So you will always have that positive attitude in life that if this is possible, well and good. If this is not possible, then what next? So if you're not clearing the exam, then that is also for a good purpose, and maybe you're going to achieve much higher than that. Then what is it? So always have that pursuit towards something higher and higher that you want to achieve in life. Always aim high, and whatever targets you have set, that is only temporary. Tomorrow you might clear the exam and become an IAS officer, but then what? So you always have that continuous pursuit in life for knowing more, for getting more knowledge, for getting more success, for whatever is your personal choice. So that attitude should always be there. Never settle down at any point in your life. So have that positive attitude, and whatever you aim will be yours. So that's it for today. Thank you.